Welcome to the AC Report today. I'm Christopher Hills, and today we're lucky to have Kyle Tesloff. He's a Stetson student, he's a junior, he's an economics major and a political science minor. So while he's very smart, unfortunately I don't think you're going to get hired afterwards, man. There's no jobs for you guys. Nah, I'm just kidding. But today we're going to discuss economics, we're going to discuss like Milton Friedman, Adam Smith, capitalism, everything that's good, and maybe we'll even discuss the bad economics like communism and Karl Marx. So let's start off with Milton Friedman. Like, how do you feel about that guy?
He's a modern day Adam Smith in my eyes. 70s, if you watch a lot of his interviews, he talks about how greed is good, which is on a very good movie called Wall Street with Michael Douglas. They talk about how greed, for lack of a better term, is good. And like we were going to talk about the anti-black laws, how minimum wage is just, it discriminates against people and people don't have a chance to build their credentials and offer services to an employer that means something.
No, definitely. I mean, Milton Friedman, he definitely discussed the minimum wage laws at his time being the most anti-black laws since, Jim Crow laws and slavery. And it's because he kind of saw, back in his time, when the black youth and the white youth would go up for jobs, they would tend to pay the black youth, a little bit less and then give them the job. So actually, even back during like the racist times in the 1920s and such, like black youth unemployment and white youth unemployment were almost the same level. Like, it was actually remarkable. And then as wage laws are more and more increased, you actually see the separation where there's that unemployment gap between white and black, where whites are actually getting more hired. And he pointed out, like, minimum wage laws, no matter how you feel about them, were started by white racists to make sure black youths couldn't move on and progress and get the experience that you need to get that higher paycheck. And that's something he's very big on. Another thing I love about Milton Friedman, of course, his Nobel Prize in economics. I mean, his credibility is so great. I mean, he helped create the federal withholding tax system. So for a lot of people out there, they don't know that before him, like, we used to just pay our taxes as a giant one lump sum at the end of every year. And a lot of people weren't really prepared for that. They weren't that great at saving for themselves. So he helped people save and actually get money back too, so they could even use their money on other things. So, like, it was almost like a bonus from the government. And then my biggest thing with him that I love to talk about is his theory of consumption function. So a lot of people, especially like the Obama fans and the Sanders fans, mainly the Obama fans, they're big on Keynesian economics. They always think that's like the best way to do it. And that's a big reason why they do the fight for 15 and all that. My thing is, if they just knew who Milton Friedman was, they understood why Keynesian economics doesn't work. He proved it in his theory, that as you get more of an income and you make more money, your consumption doesn't decline. Like, rich people aren't Scrooge McDucks diving into their like vault of gold. Like, that doesn't happen. Like, the reason why people are rich is because they invest into the economy, and the economy gets bigger, the GDP gets bigger, and all of a sudden jobs are being created. I mean, that's why we saw, I know you know about the Donald Trump tax cut that just happened. That's why our GDP is near 4% finally. It's because we're cutting taxes and American businesses are, once again, the rich people are investing into our economy. Whereas when you increase taxes like Obama, I mean, people think it was a good economy. The GDP never even, I think it barely touched 1%. It's ridiculous. I mean, like, how do you feel about that, like the tax cuts and all that?
The tax cuts are great. I'll bring up a famous economist, Arthur Laffer, later on in the podcast. But if you look at heritage.org, they have a scale of economic freedom. And back in the day, like when Obama was there, we were declining every single year. If you look at places like Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore, they have great economic freedom. Their unemployment's around 2%, which is half of what ours is right now. And because we're still recovering from that 8-year period where you were just arrested in horrible economic development and freedom, and business freedom was low. 2016, half of businesses failed within the first 2 years. And one of my favorite things about Friedman is that a lot of people fight for the idea that when the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. But that's not true. The rich create jobs, they provide wages for people, and if taxes are cut, wages will get higher. It's a fact.
No, I agree completely. I mean, after World War II especially, we saw what the free market did for third world poverty. It was cut in half because of the free market system, and as we call capitalism. I mean, where you see socialistic ideas, you see food shortages, you see food lines. You see because the government wants to control money, they start controlling all the other parts of your life. Milton Friedman talks about this all the time. Capitalism isn't just economic freedom. It is political freedom. Yes, it's one of the best quotes, and people really don't understand that. But as soon as you let the government take one thing, they don't just stop it. They're not just satisfied with that. I mean, we saw Obama, like, as soon as he was, you know, as soon as he got control over the media, and as soon as he got a little bit of control over, say, like the military and what we could do, then he started going for the healthcare and stuff like that. He started going for, you know, even more minimum wage laws. I mean, you see what's going on in Seattle right now. Like, people are losing jobs. It's one of those, like, yeah, you're getting paid more per hour, but you're actually getting less money overall because they're cutting your hours. So $12 an hour sounds nice, but when you're only working like 6 hours a week, that's nothing. I'd rather get paid $10 an hour but work 30 hours instead of, you know, $12 an hour and only work 6. Mm-hmm. People just, I don't know, they don't see the end game. They really don't. They see it's such a greedy motion, you know? It really is. I want to talk more about, you know, capitalism being economic freedom, because a lot of people don't remember, but during the Jim Crow laws era, the reason why Jim Crows, which is a big government example of racism, was because back before then, it was still racist times, but the Democrats in the South, they remembered that, you know, they wanted no blacks to be served in the restaurants. But because of capitalism, every business owner wanted black dollars, because once capitalism doesn't see black, white, brown, or whatever, they just see green for money. Yeah. And so, I mean, during the Jim Crow laws, I mean, they wanted to make sure, you know, blacks could get fed and all that, and it was actually, like, besides the racism, like, economic-wise, they were actually being taken care of. They were allowed to eat and stuff, and then that's when the Jim Crow laws were put in to segregate. I mean, how do you feel about, like, government being involved in money or economics?
I'm just mainly free enterprise. We need to lower taxes, especially business taxes. Another thing with Keynes and Hayek, I'm sure you're familiar, is saving and spending. They're both right. You need to save and spend, but they didn't account for the fact that you need money to save and invest. That's why the rich find so many jobs, because they save their money and they invest it. And that's not creating the government's violating your bank account.
No, I agree completely. I think a lot of people, they don't understand why, like, unemployment numbers were so low during Obama too. Like, because once again, that's a good number to have low unemployment numbers, but there's a difference between, like, the Obama and, like, the Reagan or the Trump numbers. Reagan and Trump numbers are low because they're getting real jobs. They're getting industrial jobs. They're getting jobs, you know, from UPS or, you know, big industries. Like, even Apple right now is hiring like crazy, and even Disney and all of them. Yeah. Whereas Obama, not only was he taking people out of the workforce, which naturally lowers unemployment, and putting them on welfare at a ridiculous rate, but he was also putting them in fake government jobs, just to make, once again, the government bigger. And that's what bothered me so much is, you know, people talk about this great unemployment rate. It's like, yeah, but everyone's on welfare now, not looking for a job. Mm-hmm. That's not a good thing. Once again, that number doesn't mean too much. It's, you know, how you get to that number. I know you're a little bit conservative and libertarian. What is your ideal tax rate? Like, are you like a 15% across the board? Are you no taxes? Like, how do you feel about that?
We definitely need some taxes, just for major things like roads. And I've seen Domino's, how they fix roads because they need it for their drivers, you know. But at the end of the day, they're not going to build highways. Schools are still going to have to be built unless privatization. So we need some sort of tax. I think 15 is actually a good number for income tax. But it should fluctuate up the ladder slightly, between 2 or 3% from the bottom and the up. So between 12 and 18%, I think would be a solid number. The corporate tax should be 15%, I would say.
Gotcha. See, this is where we actually slightly disagree, because I'm much more libertarian on this. I think, like, I'm a big guy. Like, we need taxes for the military, like protect our freedoms. Fine with that. I'll pay taxes all day for that. And then also, like, if you want to use it for interstates, I get that, because that's technically national defense. Like, the reason why we have, like, for the Florida people, I-4, is because during World War I and World War II, we saw how bad it was, like, how great Germany was at getting tanks across their land, and that was through their interstates. So if you want to call that national defense, just in case somehow someone gets lucky enough to ever, like, come on our soil and actually attack us here, sure, fine with that. But I don't know. The one place we disagree is I don't like using taxes for, say, public education, because once again, I don't like the government controlling education.
That's why I said unless we privatize education.
Yeah, like, at least, I mean, and this is where we can at least discuss it. Like, if you want to make public education for, like, the STEMs, like engineering and all that, fine. I'd be fine for that, because at least, you know, those kids will get good jobs and stuff like that. Like, they'll actually help the economy. But when you're doing, like, gender theories and stuff like that, or, like, where they're talking, you know, teaching, like, history where, like, all of a sudden socialism isn't that bad, that's what bothers me. Because then not only are you not really teaching because you're lying to the kids, I don't like bias in teaching, you know? I don't want kids to grow up thinking Karl Marx wasn't that bad of a guy when he was incredibly anti-Semitic, and, I mean, his teachings led to over 100 million being murdered. I mean, like, kids just don't know that. I mean, there's a new study coming out because of public education. like our generation really doesn't know the Holocaust even happened anymore.
Yeah,
like there's a significant amount of kids who just don't even know what that is. But granted, these are the same kids who call Trump Hitler, so yeah, that goes to show how great our education system also is. The guy who supports Israel is a Nazi apparently, which makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
But going back to economics, the next guy I want to talk about is Adam Smith. I call him like the father of capitalism. Big fan. What are your thoughts on Adam Smith?
So as you all know, Adam Smith, 1700s, Scottish economist. He was a big proponent in getting mercantilism switched to capitalism in Europe. A big proponent for that, and I don't think we would have been done without him, honestly, in some cases. Went from feudalism to mercantilism, which was fueled by the government heavily, and then capitalism spread to the United States and has been fluctuated ever since, but it's been proven to do great things for the world in general.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think the biggest thing with Adam Smith, and by the way, that New York congresswoman, the one that's a bartender, and then apparently grew up in Brooklyn, but didn't grow up in Brooklyn and all of this stuff, you know, she said a comment the other day, like, you know, we didn't have capitalism forever. It's like, yeah, you're right, we didn't. We had feudalism for a little bit there, and that kind of sucked with all of us being serfs and everything and not having any economic freedom. So it's one of those, like, you're right, but not the time to be right for you in your party.
Yeah, I agree.
No, Adam Smith, though, I mean, Wealth of Nations is what everyone knows him as, and for the more economist people, his invisible hand, you know, how, you know, our market is guided by invisible hand, and just simple supply and demand. I mean, that sounds common sense to us, especially in 2018, but how he did it, he really encouraged people to actually brainstorm for once. I know it sounds so weird, like, to have that be a radical idea, but that really was back then. Like, people really started inventing technology. I'm not talking about, like, iPhones and stuff. I'm talking about, like, how to do agriculture differently, or how to make, you know, business systems where all of a sudden, you know, the guy on top will make enough money to help everyone out. And, I mean, he's one-on-one on free trade, and I think, because a lot of people think, like, I'm a big Trumper, but the one thing I've always had an issue with Trump is, like, tariffs, and it's because of Adam Smith. I love his teachings, and he is all about laissez-faire. And I think if we would follow Adam Smith more and more, I think people would also be a lot more libertarian. I know libertarian is almost seen as radical, but back in the day, it's the system that worked. I mean, our founding fathers were definitely at least conservative, if not fully libertarian, because, I mean, they hated big government. More on Adam Smith, I do want to ask you about how do you feel about, you know, tariffs and all that, though? I really do want to know your opinion, because I know some people say, tariffs are bad, but it's necessary for the long run to equal everything out. Like, how do you feel about what's going on?
You have to find an equilibrium where it promotes trade and just commonwealth between all countries. You know what I mean? You have to. There are goods produced here that other countries need, and there's goods produced in China that we need.
Yeah,
you know, and they can be produced much more efficiently and cheaper over there. So it should be at a rate where it still promotes us trading and keeping alliances with those countries, but if it gets too high, it creates warlike scenarios, as you can see.
No, definitely. I mean, I think the reason why we have had very few wars lately, and we are technically in wars, and wars are happening, especially with third world countries, but like the reason why you see Europe being so peaceful right now, pretty much like not, you know, what used to be, and why you even see the United States being very peaceful right now, is because of our economic freedom and all of our trades. You know, like, we never really want to, for lack of a better term, make China extremely mad, because we rely on them for trade.
Yeah.
And whether that's a good or bad thing we can discuss later, but that's true. And the reason why they would never step on our shoes is because they heavily rely on us.
Yep.
And same thing with, like, Germany and Canada. I mean, this is one reason why I like being in America so much, is because, one, we kind of dominate trade. Like, we make so much goods, it's because we're extremely free market country, but with all that said, like, no one ever wants to step on our shoulders. The only time people want to step on us is if they find out we're going to make things more equal and stop letting them benefit off our own money, or like if they don't do any trade with us, really, or minimal. Like, I mean, like Iran, they don't like us too much because, especially now that we took away all their billions of dollars that Obama gave them, you know, they don't like that too much. So, but anytime you see us have a trade partner, you see almost a giant ally, whether they admit it or not. They want, you know, everyone wants to trade with America because of how great our economy is. I think people really don't understand that too.
I mean, you provide so many jobs for other countries too. You're talking about how minimum wage is an anti-black law. If that happened in other countries, it'd be the same thing. We provide so many jobs to them, even though they're low pay. It provides a job that's better than being on the street, you know. And one of the biggest things with Adam Smith is his whole idea of how everyone acts on their own self-interest, and I love that.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to do anything for anyone else unless you're just a great person, you know. Like, of course we like to volunteer and help people who are less fortunate, but my favorite quote from Adam Smith is, "It's not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, the baker that we can expect our dinner, but from the regard to their own self-interest." It's a great quote, you know. You're not going to go, unless you're going to just go out and grow your own dinner, your own food, it's not going to happen. You got to rely on someone else to get it, but they're only doing it to make money.
No, definitely. I think a lot of people, especially conservatives and libertarians, we think people as greedy, and that's not a bad thing. That's why we, like Adam Smith especially, like that's why we have capitalism. Because capitalism is the only system where greedy people can be successful by helping out others. Like, you can't be greedy and just deny people service and have everything for your own. Once again, you can't be Scrooge McDuck. You really can't.
Yeah.
Like, even to, like, and this is what I talk about all the time with like segregation and stuff like that. That doesn't happen in free market societies, because if, say, someone segregates like white people, their business will immediately close, because that's going to be a huge issue. You're missing out on so many dollars. Once again, same thing with before the Jim Crow laws. Like, when you segregate against like black Americans, your business will close because there is such a strong need that everyone else, especially even like whites and everyone else, won't go to a racist business. They'll go somewhere else, and then naturally your business will close. I think that's what's so important about the free market, is because even if you consider business people greedy, I don't really care, they do so much for the world. And also,
I totally agree.
Only in a free market society could you have a country like the United States, where we're by far the most charitable country in the world. Like, we do so much through churches or through nonprofits where we really help the world. I mean, you know, if something happens in Haiti, we're there. If something happens in a country we've never even dealt with before, we probably send, you know, supplies over there, just because we're, you know, I mean, we have a nation, not necessarily everyone's Christian, but we have such Christian Judeo values that we want everyone to do well. I mean, that really is those values, whether you think it or not. And I think we're still, I don't like using this term, but spoiled with how great our society is, that we forget that those values are Christian Judeo. Because if you go into Eastern civilization, where like even like Russia and stuff like that, if someone struggles, okay, they struggle. No one wants to help them. They really don't. Or like even going to, unfortunately, like even China and stuff like that, if they're not part of the plan that the government has, they're either just left to die, or even worse, I mean, like, if you're a woman in China and like you're pregnant and you have a baby girl coming, they'll murder the girl because that's not part of the plan. They need more men. I mean, that's disgusting.
Women are forced to retire earlier than men in China too.
Exactly.
It's about 5 or 10 years earlier than men in China.
No, it's horrific what happens in Eastern civilization. I mean, the Western civilization is so amazing. Only in the West could you free slavery. You have people equal. I mean, only in the West where you could have like, you know, me and then another black man talking, and then it'll be, like, no one even cares about it, because that's just two Americans talking. Like, only in the West could that happen. I mean, you don't see that in the East. I mean, we talk about that all the time. But I want to go back to Adam Smith. I think one of my favorite quotes of his is, "There's no such thing as free lunch," or "There's no free lunch." I really want, like, especially like the, you know, Jenny and millennials to understand that, like, no matter what, because they always talk about free healthcare, you know, free education, and all this stuff. And a lot of them understand comes from taxes, but I want them to understand what happens with those taxes. Like, you know, they always talk about wanting more money and all this stuff, and everything to be cheaper, but then they ask for the government to subsidize everything, which, I mean, what does the government do well, honestly? Like, even, I mean, public education is not well. Our healthcare system is horrific. I mean, even building a road takes years for them to do. It really does, because they don't do anything efficiently. Whether some of those things need to be done by the government, once again, we can discuss later, but everything they touch is so inefficient. And so when you ask the government to help and all this stuff, you raise taxes enormously, and all of a sudden those costs, because they're all of a sudden forced on you by the government, are going to rise naturally too, because you have to buy those things.
Yeah, and you see a lot of celebrities now are fighting back against these high taxes that we had in the past. J. Cole had a song on his album where he talked about how inefficient taxes were and how it's not going to the right things. I mean,
that's awesome.
Granted, he wanted to go to public education, which we could discuss another time, but he even agreed that taxes are spent so inefficiently.
Yeah.
It's far too high.
I think my biggest issue I have with people when they talk, like especially on the left, when they talk about raising taxes on the rich, like, I don't understand why they want to control people and what they have. Like, I always get this dream scenario, like, okay, I have $2 million or like 2 big houses. Why does that bother you? Like, how does that possibly hurt you? Like, once again, in fact, typically, like, I always like to use Bill Gates also. Like, he has several billions of dollars. that doesn't hurt anyone. In fact, that helps people because once again, he makes Microsoft bigger and gives everyone jobs and innovation. Like, I don't understand this horrible negative view of rich people we have in our culture. It's the strangest thing in the world to me.
It's ridiculous.
Like, people are so proud to be poor almost. And I'm not saying that being poor is bad or anything, but the goal and dream is definitely to get money, not just to take care of yourself, but so we can take one another. Because once again, we are a very charitable society. And charity comes through our own giving, by the way, not through government forcing us to spend. Like, that's a big difference also for people, they always say we're not charitable. It's like, no, we give through churches and stuff on our own dime. We don't want to have the government hold the gun to our head and make us do it. That's not charity, that's stealing.
We give so much more than other countries too.
Yeah.
Talking about how we're not helping Mexico with the whole immigration thing. We do more than any other country, but it's not enough. So we're seen as the bad guys, even though no one's doing anything else to help.
Speaking of that, what bothers me is the former president and the guy who just got elected, who's a socialist. So, Jesus. Once again, they just elected a new socialist. So any socialist who wants socialism, go to Mexico. It's great. What bothers me is they're so mad about the United States and our immigration system. Like, they're literally campaigning on USA policies. This is the most ridiculous thing ever. Fix your own country.
Yeah.
Like, you are an elected official. I get if you're a citizen, escape it, because I feel sorry for any Mexican who actually lives there, because good lord, I mean, cartels are there. Like, you don't have any type of freedom, really. I mean, you even speak out against the culture. It's horrendous. I mean, like how men treat women in that culture. Like, people call like Trump and stuff sexist. Look at a Mexican culture family. The man is overrunning the women. Like, women aren't respected. I mean, it is disgusting.
It's horrible.
Yeah, it's once again, it bothers me so much because they constantly attack America. We're flawed some, right? Like, we have our issues. I don't think anyone's perfect. I don't think, there's no utopia. I don't believe in that. I think we're by far the greatest country. I know we agree on that, but I think most people could agree on that. But, I mean, at least we have freedom of speech. We're the only country that has that. I mean, that simple thing, we don't have. Like, I mean, you go to Canada, because people always talk about Canada also, they don't have freedom of speech. Like, you call someone by the wrong gender there, you're arrested. That is a law. That's the most absurd thing ever. I'm not saying go out there and be mean to everyone, but like, you can't arrest people for just saying words. Like, that really bothers me. How do you feel about like that kind of freedom and stuff, especially with Mexico and Canada?
It's so important. Economic freedom and political freedom and just your freedom in general, it all stems from the same place, and people have to protect that, Mm-hmm. We have to protect ownership rights, we have to protect the private sector, all these things that help us be free to make money, have that white picket fence in the suburban house. You all need that because freedom, it's not protected by a lot of countries. It's horrible.
Oh no, I agree completely. I also like that. That's the American dream too. Like the white picket house. I love that dream. Going back to also individual rights, I think when people discuss like minority rights and stuff, they forget about the smallest minority there is, the individual. Yeah. There is no smaller minority than one person, and they are so scared to protect that if they're not the color that they want or something like that. That's what bothers me. Because on the conservative side, the only time you'll ever hear us really mention race, and this is a generalization, by the way, not every conservative is like this, but generally, the only time you'll ever hear us mention race is if something happens that's awesome. Like, we boast about like black unemployment being the lowest it's ever been under Trump, or Latino unemployment being the lowest it's ever been under Trump. I mean, we're proud of that stuff. Even for women, I mean, Trump's promoting women left and right like crazy. I mean, he just considered a woman for his Supreme Court in Barrett. I mean, that just doesn't happen, really, even in modern times. And it's the only time we talk about sex is when good things are happening. I mean, I just wish we'd focus more on the individual. I really do.
I agree. That's what all starts from.
Oh yeah, man. Alright, so I do want to mention a little bit about Karl Marx, because he's so popular to this day. I mean, the #1 book in college campuses in the United States is the Communist Manifesto, which I have no idea how these kids are getting to. Like, this bothers me. It doesn't bother me that they're reading it. It bothers me that they read it, believe it, accept it, and then won't read The Wealth of Nations. Yeah. Or they won't read, any of Milton Friedman's several books, It irks me because, once again, I always encourage people, like, even myself, I watch CNN daily. And it's not because I agree with them, it's because I know the only way to understand everything more is to get a world view. Don't be in that closet full of just conservatives or full of just liberals. You have to expand. I mean, how do you feel about Karl Marx, though?
Like I said before, how business freedom, political freedom goes hand in hand. You look at all the deaths caused by communism, and it's horrible. And a lot of people don't have economic freedom. They can't do what they want. They're forced to live in slums or on the streets because they have nowhere to go but down.
Mm-hmm.
It's horrible.
So I want to know, because I know you're a college student, how often do you hear, oh, but that wasn't real communism, or that wasn't real socialism? Like, how often do you hear that?
From a few kids, the more outspoken ones, but you'll see a lot of kids just hate capitalism for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if we can talk about it on the podcast, but there was a girl on Twitter who was just raging about how horrible capitalism was, but she was asking people to buy her news in her Twitter bio for $10. She's a capitalist right there, but people don't realize that. They think it's just these huge monopolies, which we can. I could say some monopolies are bad because it doesn't promote competition, especially government-created monopolies like the Postal Service and waste management. But everyone deep down is a capitalist. They want to make money.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I always go to campuses and I always talk to professors who spread communism and talk about what good. I'm like, okay, well, do you teach for free? Like, seriously, do you?
Yeah.
And they always say, no. What? And I go, why? And he goes, oh, I want to make money. I was like, no, duh. All of us do. Welcome to capitalism. It's one of those things. And also, there's a communist little exhibit in Orlando the other day. And what's funny was they were selling T-shirts. I thought that was the funniest thing in the world. They were selling T-shirts for like $10 or whatever it was. Doesn't matter. Even if it's for a penny, that's still capitalism. And I mentioned that. I was like, hey, why aren't you guys giving these out for free? And they're like, oh, it's to help our business, no, it's not this business, our organization and all that. I was like, oh, so you sell stuff to make a profit? And they're like, yeah, why? And I was like, do you? I just wanted to like hand them a supply-demand chart. Like, just study this for a little bit and you'll vote conservative in 10 years when you get it.
Yeah.
It drove me insane.
And teachers nowadays are openly Marxist. It's horrible to me. I found out I was going to have a political class with a Marxist, and I was horrified. In the entire semester, there's only me and another conservative student, and we were both asked questions far more than anyone else. If we didn't laugh at his communist jokes or agree with how he hates capitalism and neoliberalism, all those things, he would just ask us questions and try to just rage at us in class and roast us.
Well, you know the thing about communist jokes, right? It's a lot like food in communist nations. Not everyone gets it. No, but on a serious note, the thing that bothers me is, like, when you call someone a communist, or not even call someone, but like when someone even openly says I'm a communist or socialist, there's no sting to it anymore. And that's really bothers me. Because as soon as someone says they're a Nazi, which is horrific, by the way, if someone's actually a Nazi or a National Socialist, whatever you prefer, like, that is a horrific thing, and we all know that for some reason. For some reason, we don't have that sting for communism, where Joseph Stalin and all them come from. It's like, they killed more people, and just because we don't really know as much, because, I mean, you ask people what the Gulag is, and they just look at you with a blank stare, I mean, it's still horrific things. In fact, they had their own Holocaust. It wasn't just for Jews, it was for their own civilians. I mean, people just don't know the history. And I think for us to really progress into a better nation and a better society is going to be us just finally accepting the free market as the best system. I don't think socialist ideas will ever die off, because I think you'll always have a Bernie Sanders who wrongly points at Denmark and stuff like that as being socialist, which they're not. But I think you'll always have that. But can we at least just get rid of full-on communism? Yeah, like, if we can do that, I think we'll go a lot farther and just not necessarily better our own lives, but better the lives of third world nations that rely on people to make choices for them and help them out to get more freedom. And I think that's the next step in our journey.
And there's been this shift just since, I would say, 2 years before the 2016 election, where people started campaigning, Trump was campaigning, Sanders was campaigning, that kids accept socialism and communism, but they don't know the difference, first of all. And second of all, they act like it's okay, that they can survive like that. They all want to make $15 an hour and think they could do so much on that. Your parents aren't making $15 an hour, they're taking you on vacations, they're doing all those things. You can't do that on $15 an hour, and they think that that's the ceiling for them, and that's the thing. They don't realize that there's so much more potential for them.
Exactly, and a lot of these kids, like, once again, they don't have any financial responsibility. They don't, typically, like the socialists that like I meet and stuff on campuses, they barely pay for their tuition.
They don't have jobs.
Exactly, they don't have jobs. And they're just, once again, sheltered in this little bubble of all socialists where it's a paradise. And I get it. It sounds awesome. Free stuff sounds great. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh, that actually comes out of my own money. And then my neighbor's money. And then if we don't want this, we're still forced to pay for it. Like, and that's where people start, once again, I mean, a lot of studies show the older you get, the more you work, the more you turn conservative, and there's a reason why. I think my biggest issue with socialists, though, is like they are fine with mediocre. I'm gonna make this, but you also have to make this, or we're just gonna be fine with the supplies we have. There's no innovation. There's no innovation. I mean, like in capitalist worlds, you have iPhones. Everyone always wants to make stuff because that's the only way you get rich. They always want to make stuff and make the world better. Or in socialist countries, I mean, has a socialist country ever made anything important? Like I really don't know. Like during like the West Germany and East Germany, the reason why East Germany had cars was because they'd steal them from West Germany. Like they didn't even make their own cars back then. They were it's literally just stealing stuff. And eventually you run out of people's money. That's kind of, I mean, look at Venezuela. That's why people are literally starving, is because of, they had all this oil, but they didn't keep making stuff. And now they're the nation with the largest oil natural deposit is running out of oil. That's ridiculous. They're running out of natural supplies that like is God given to them. And just because they decide to be tyrannical about it, are running out of supplies.
And even these socialist countries, they all started off with capitalism. They went from feudalism to mercantilism to capitalism. You can't build a nation from the ground up with socialism. It won't work.
No.
There's no one to provide jobs. There's no one to grow food, to do anything. They all want the same job, the same wage. They don't realize that there's no ceiling. You can do anything you want in life.
No, I agree completely. All right, man. Is there anything else you want to add about Milton Friedman or Adam Smith?
No.
All right, man. Thanks so much for coming on. We've been the AC Report.